host, Dr. Derrick Colon, and I'm excited to have you here. Welcome to Urban Exegesis Studios. I'm your host, Dr. Derrick Colon, and I'm excited to have you here. This is the place where hip-hop culture meets faith, history, and community. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. To stay connected and to unlock exclusive content, please join channel membership. You can also find us across social media. On Facebook at Urban Exegesis. On Instagram at Urban Exegesis Studios. And on TikTok at Urban Exegesis Studios. Thank you for tuning in. Sit back, relax. Brother, we there?
Indeed.
Okay. Let me see. Because I can hear you, but I'm using my headphones and my headphones just jam me up. So welcome to everybody in the chat. Know you've been waiting for a minute. And what we're gonna do today is we're just gonna let I'm gonna put these headphones on. Let me just put this headphones on. Just want to be able to connect. There we go. I'm gonna actually put my man in the backstage for a minute. So let me just do that real quick. I'm gonna remove him from the stage and just welcome everybody to the live today. And sorry for the delay. Yes, sir. Just some goofy things going on. You love technology, but then sometimes it doesn't work. So we're praying, hoping everything works out today. And we got a special guest today, Sunez Allah, who is just a juggernaut as far as information, as far as scholarship, as far as this topic. And so he's going to be doing a build today on the Nuyorican connection to hip hop culture. I want him to really speak to the post that he really posted and I just want him to just go in and, build with us. Of course, I'm going to ask him to watch his language. If I don't know that he'd use his language, but we just try to not have any language on the channel. But I think that he's capable. So without any further ado, I'm gonna bring him on and we're gonna get it going. So let me bring my man on. Boom. Sunez, what's up, bro?
Peace. Everything is peace.
Everything's good.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
All right, man. So listen, I saw your post. As did many people, your build.
Right.
And one of the things that struck me was the way that you were able to just break this down systematically. And so the topic is Nuyorican, the Nuyorican connection to hip hop culture, and the whole topic of Fat Joe. And I guess that is what sparked your writing of that kind of that article. But I'm gonna just turn the floor over to you, man. So, what triggered you to even write that piece?
Yeah. First I want to say peace, peace to everybody that I know, the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths, my low life family, everybody that builds with me in hip hop, from my brothers, my DJ Toshi, King Kamal, Infinite Mind, all the musicians I build with on a personal level. I write a book. I have written a book. I've written 9 books. And every year this decade, one of them has been each year I've written a book called The Real of said year, right? The Real of 2021 and 2020, The Real of 2020, 2022, 23, and now I'm writing the Real of 2024. I say this because this is where my work is really engaged in. My work is engaged in detailing the music that is not really talked about, you know? And it was such a vast amount of music that in the 2010s, I started to call it the invisible Renaissance era. There was so much, it was invisible to everyone. It was a Renaissance because there's such an increase of skill levels, wonderful work. So this is what I called it. But I write an intro to the book every time. And this year, the book has been very difficult to continue to write because I have to go backwards and deal with people's speaking about these issues, you know? I think it all started for me because I get, I'm being told throughout the year that Puerto Ricans had nothing to do with hip hop, as if that was a fact, right? As if that was something that is a truth to be told, and we were dealing with that, right? Now, this is not something that I just happen to not know about. This is not something that I just happen to hear all of a sudden this year, but it came from people that had a racist vitriol and comes from spearheaded, meaning the battery in the back, from a group that has been racist for years, since their spark in the mid 2010s, right? So that particular post that I posted came after I was hearing a couple of days where I really wasn't paying attention to it. I had made knowledge born. I had spoken about it. I said I give you references from the book to the individuals. Dr. Derrick Colon, you know that I consider you a more than valid scholar in this, though, and really the person to go to for the early b-boy crews, for the early experiences, for the journalism that goes into the detail of fact-checking, corresponding, properly validating anecdotal experiences, right? Something very important. Whose anecdotal experiences is worthwhile, right? Who has a certain legacy of information that is coming along with their experience that can actually support the experience that they speak about, right? This is very rare, right? So when I made the post, it really came out of like what I found to be the most a real hypocrisy began because I'm hearing people tell me, my 5% people that are supposedly 5%, other people telling me, you know, we would like Sunez to talk about Fat Joe and his remarks and everything. And first of all, just before we get into all this, Fat Joe, no particular individual speaks for all individuals of a said group. Okay? We can't even find brothers out there that could speak for their whole family that they claim to represent. So we can't find that, though, when we come in out for like a whole peoples, a whole Puerto Rican peoples, a whole country of peoples, right? So I found the great hypocrisy that people expect me not only to speak for Fat Joe and explain it as if he did something wrong, and there were things that he did wrong, more in the manner as opposed to what he was saying, but to actually have to speak about as if I was supposed to apologize for those things, you know? And that's like, listen, when there's a Tyler Perry movie, I'm going to have some brothers on speed dial. So you could make those posts and you could start apologizing for the coonery, right? This is not really the way. And when I wrote the post, you know, it was after research, going back and researching, rereading certain texts and realizing that this scholarship is something that is with the vitriol this year of only Black Americans created it. They didn't need anyone to create it. And I just see a pile of hypocrisy after hypocrisy. I see hypocrisy who tell me that they're brothers and that we're one in the same original. We have Black blood, we have indigenous blood, and then treating us different. They didn't need anything. And I'm telling you that as a scholar of music, as a scholar of ethnomusicology, from working with legends in ethnomusicology like Dr. Juan Flores, working with, in the very early beginning of her career, Dr. Raquel Rivera, working at Center for Puerto Rican Studies in the mid 90s as a the best type of fly on the wall you could be, a research assistant. And I was going in there, and this whole thing got me going back memory lane. And I'm looking, does somebody get to say that hip hop or something started and they were the only ones there when they're a performer? Do they get to say that they were the only ones there, right, when they were on stage? I just recently did a show with my brother DJ Toshi, part of his Rock the House series. One of the greatest promoters of all time, continues to fuel us even after he's passed. Doc Ock, remembered in perfection. Un Boricua, the Sunset Park. And I was hosting the show, and I would go into the audience. I'm walking in the audience, past the bar, walking everywhere between acts, staying there and watching the act. And I'm realizing to myself, there's no way I could catch everybody. There's no way I could do the knowledge and see everybody that was performing. But all of a sudden now, people's personal viewpoints are now standardized. You are on the stage, though, with the lights on you, but you happen to see everybody with full light. It doesn't work this way. And then now, lack of scholarship. I said, listen, this guy's the first B-boy. Right? I name names. They say Trixie's the first B-boy. He goes, I didn't see any Puerto Ricans there. And we all know that y'all don't know what a Puerto Rican looks like. He has to disclaim it. He has to disclaim it. Say, listen, I'm not Puerto Rican because I'm light-skinned and I'm not Puerto Rican. But not every Puerto Rican looks like Sunez a lot. So now we have to go through another thing. If someone says that they're there, then what are the actual things that they did to show and prove that they created the things? And then now we have to go backwards, because this is a hybrid culture. Picking things apart, taking things from everywhere, developing things over time. And so now it counts, though, where particularly develop it, though. So now we see more hypocrisy in the pseudo scholarship. We see people like, again, Dr. Derrick Colon, incredible work, goes through the B-boys, goes through the particular moves. I go down memory lane. I read texts that have not been countered in any type of way and still hold true, like Foundation, right, by Dr. Joseph G. Schloss. And they go through everything. They go through the rocking, the up-rocking, how that moved from the biker gangs and moved everywhere. Giving detail from people that are still here, that even Colon has been in contact with, other people have been in contact with, and said, listen, these are the direct sources. No, but that scholarship is not allowed, though. We are not allowed to take something that just happened, right? Just happened and infiltrated every single borough. And when now the B-boys in the Bronx do it, they do it exactly the same way with the same ethos. So you're telling me the same type of up-rocking, the same type of jerks, freezes, right? The same type of Apache line. All of this was developed, right, by people that had no contact with the Brooklyn Boricuas, that did it from Bushwick outward. But they do it the same exact way with the same type of ethos, the same spirit, unlike maneuvers. No, it's not from there, Sunez. It's these guys that we saw in ancient Africa dancing, and we got a clip. We finally got a clip of some Africans out there. We don't know the year. They don't know the year, but take it as ancient Kemet, and they were dancing, doing all that. That's crazy. The hypocrisy continues to be where they could use the scholarship style, right? Influences count. We didn't need you. We had these influences, but they jump back to the Nicholas brothers. Listen, I tell you this, if someone asks you who the greatest dancers of all time, no, Nicholas Brothers got to be 1, 2, or 3, and we got to put them down and everything. But here's the thing, though. I'll just catch a flaw, just one of the flaws, right? They say Nicholas Brothers is like where it all came from and everything. But the most important thing about b-boying, every time we go see b-boys rock, when we see battles, when we see stuff, what's missing? The confrontation, the anger, the militancy, the expression of fury. Nicholas Brothers is smiling through the whole thing. There's no aggression. There's no battle against anyone. You couldn't even dance like that in a movie like that back then. So it's like the arguments are hypocritical. They disallow certain things. And when I wrote this post, I was like, I'm just going to pile it all and throw it out there. We continue to get things. What I find is that we continue to have Ricans that innovate things, that we show and prove our creators in the graffiti and in the b-boying. And then they tell you, well, nah, but we were doing that anyway. And they give no references, or that they say that is discounted. It's not really relevant. I've heard we would have came with it that way. And here's another thing that became a very personal thing, right? And people know I'm a 5%er, right? To do the things that I have done that nobody has done in the 5% nation. Nobody has done it the way I've done it. Nobody has taught at a law school in Mecca this long as I have on my 25th year, right? Nobody has done that consistently. Nobody has edited over 5 books, written books on this, done all of that. Let alone the stuff I've done in hip hop that people haven't done. And yet I had to do that as a Boricua. And then now we get the other pseudo-sociological claim that if, let's say, a Puerto Rican or Jamaican, right? It's not just a Puerto Rican. If they create something in a larger Black American space, or in this case, American space, then it is not the creation credited to the individual and say, let's say, for example, Sunez invented this. It is valid as, let's say, for us, right? We the gods, it's valid as a 5% creation because the God made it in this cipher in hip hop. It is also not valid as a Puerto Rican's creation because he made it in this space. And this space was dominated by said, let's say, Black Americans, right? This is also false too, because it takes not only is it massively false, but I've had it thrust upon me, and it's like every single man's creation has his reality going into the creation, and it deserves to look back at what he had done. The people would do that to me, and they go, "Listen, I didn't even grow up in a Black neighborhood. I grew up in Sunset Park, Brooklyn." And the formative years I grew up in there weren't even other Latinos. It was near 100% Puerto Rican. Where if you weren't Puerto Rican, you were saying you were Puerto Rican. That's how intense it was. Anything that Sunez makes, it has to be seen as that type of creation. So anything that Charlie Chase makes, anything that Crazy Legs makes, anything that the legends make in hip hop that were Boricua, these are Boricua creations. These aren't appropriations and adjustments, though. It's the same thing. The lack of scholarship is so bad that we are so obsessed with finding out who's first that we forget about the timeline and we don't learn any lessons from that. Here's the ethnomusicological viewpoint in the lesson of why it impairs everything. There's not only this type of scholarship of who did it first, and then you end it there. In that day, he's the first one at the party. He's the first one to touch tables. He's the first one to say something that rhymed, and then we're done with the whole thing. And not only it impairs more than just hip hop. Okay, let me tell you how it impairs. This goes back to me into the 90s, even further back into the 70s, 80s, where you had the Black Books movement and you had exceptional works by Cheikh Diop, African Origin of Civilization, for example, Civilization of Barbarism. You had Ivan Van Sertima's canon of works, African origin canons, right? Books, right? Where they were like, the ultimate scholar mixtapes, I call them, right? Books like this were being done, and they were finding the origins to find that they were original Black people that were founders in Kemet, that were built civilization, right? We were learning all these things, and they were right and exact. But just as Sertima, and that's why I mentioned Sertima, just as Sertima spoke about, what impairs this is that you will stay stuck on who began it. And who began it was good for sales and controversy, because every Black in America was taking back their humanity. Every Black across the world was taking back their humanity by realizing that, listen, white people just didn't give us the pyramids. White people just didn't give us civilization. We were civilized as well, right? This was getting our humanity back. But I always said, listen, after all that, what about the timeline? What about the timeline that shows what Blacks were doing and how it develops to all of humanity? And all of this has been scrapped. It's not a question of scholarship. And I've always seen this stagnation in the Black books era where the scholarship just quit on just leaving foundations. But we have the same thing here, because the history of Mecca, Harlem, what we gods call Harlem, is not just the history of the 5%, not a history of Nation of Islam being there. It's a history of every type of religion being there, every type of spirituality being pitched. And the same before the charlatans of religion and leadership got into the web, before they got into Twitter, before they made mass movements that become FBA, and I'm going to get into all of that. They were first on that block there. Now remember, you walk down and you would see the same brothers that you see. I'm not even going to name names. There's only one name I'm naming. I'm getting to the end point, and I'm not naming no other names because they know. You walk down, you were selling great lectures. We used to sell lectures on videotape. Khalid Muhammad, Sertima, like I mentioned, deep scholars, but also the more militant scholars. And brothers were like, yo, get your Black power here. The white man this, right, all that. And we was all feeling it. We was collecting that. There was no YouTube. We was collecting these lectures, right? Everything. The subjects were about melanin, the science of melanin, the history of the original peoples, the indigenous peoples of the Americas. We were collecting everything. But then they were like, listen, we can get more people following us though if we make certain claims on it. Certain claims that say we need to do this and we need to have this. But how do you make a group unless you make restrictions on the group? You see, I'm supposed to be part of the 5% where we don't make those distinctions based on what you see, but what you know. What you see with the eye is not what you know, right? And the C in our alphabet means what you understand. None of this is coming from that. These charlatans graduated to the internet. I have to argue about and say this guy's a race baiter, and all he's doing is just trying to get a very exclusionary marker, set up exclusionary markers, so that way you could say this money, reparations, belongs to us. It absolutely doesn't belong to anyone else, and it also has the double speak of saying, if we ensure that only Black Americans are even dealt with this, they will get their reparations, and the U.S. government doesn't have to worry about who they have done wrong to following that. And here's one of the big problems with that, right? For the United States to give money for wrongdoing, that wrongdoing is not a jar that you could open and then act like you could close it when you feel it's consistent to you. So they open it for reparations, right? We're not even going to talk yet about what type of reparations. They're going to have to talk about what they're going to do with Puerto Rico, because now it's open. The bag's open. You know what I mean? And so now in this reparations thing, what do we do up? What do? We don't deal with knowledge, we deal with race baiting. But see, now it's been flipped on its head. It's okay to race bait. Tariq Nasheed starts the gets the FBA going, gets its own flag. That doesn't pop off too much. What also doesn't pop off too much is that they say we're different. Who are the people that are coming here that look most like them? Africans from Africa. We're different from them. They ain't the same. They all hate us. Nobody likes us. They all hate us, though. We have to get this. They get stuff and we don't get stuff. I'm going to tell you something. Most of that stuff is true. They get stuff, you don't get stuff. Right? You know what's funny? 5%ers, though, they know that the Black American is the most oppressed, though. We also know that that's why the knowledge was brought here. Knowledge itself was brought particularly to these people, the Black American here. But some of them didn't read through Elijah's books very well. Some of them didn't analyze 120 well, that was just the beginning stepping stone to all the original people. Not the 17 million, the 4,400,000,000 all over the world. But people are okay to just stop. Let's stop all the world. Let's stop everything. Let's not do anything. Let's not build with anybody. Let's only build about what we want to get, what we need to get now. And so you see a sloppy reparations movement, nothing in detail. We want money amounts, but I don't see any kind of like what it would do for community building. I don't see any seizure of assets. I don't see any land ownership. Nothing in this talk of detail. How it can't just be one payment, though. It's got to be what? Consistent investment in a targeted way that the organized community decides as such. And they tell me, Sunez, that's what we're doing, though. We're distinguishing ourselves from you all people. So now my people that was family, my people that's brothers go, we distinguish ourselves from you. Because y'all don't treat us the same. See, the thing is, right? We was taught that there's an 85, 10, and the 5. The 10 oppress, the 5 know the truth and they share, and the 85, they submit and they go along with the show. So now the people that submit, though, the 85, their ways and actions, though, are now applied to me. Again, I have to answer for all the fat Joes in the universe. This isn't it. And I say that because the leaders of these discussions of FBA are being empowered by the builders that used to be in the community building unity. And now they're out here saying, nah, y'all don't treat us right. And they give me some adults that are on the corner, though. Not the youth that they should be building it. They talking about that. Right? And I'm thinking this is like Iverson, right? Not a game. You're not talking about the game, dealing with the youth. You talk about old people. You talk about practice. Not a game, practice. That's what you're talking about. So all this FBA comes to a head because it is easier to attack the people that are closest, and those are the Latinos, the Boricuas here. It's a joke that people that I've known in the community act like Fat Joe. How dare you say the name? I was with you when you were singing it. When you were singing Fat Joe saying the N-word, you were singing it along with him. You was leaning back. You were leaning back so far, right? That you was on their back. These are the club hits. These are club hits, Colon. These aren't the ones that I write about.
Let me interject real quick. I want to ask you a question. I want to go backwards a little bit because one of the things that I'm noticing is, so this was happening 2 years ago, and then when Joe recently just re-sparked this conversation, now they're going back to the so-called receipts. And the so-called receipts are the 30s, the 40s, the 60s, these videos. And I've always said, pardon me, I've always said that the reason why they need to go to those is to make sense of their claim. That that looks like this, so therefore it was this. And I'm saying those moves have nothing to do with the movement. There's no association with the movement. And so why do you think that there is this desperation to find receipts way back here to prove that they're the creators.
Yeah.
What is that about?
You know, I consider b-boying the first created element. I consider it the first one because it actually stands on its own as something completely original. The music is not even, if we talk about music and musical genres, hip hop isn't even set in song. There is no 16 bar verse. There is no chorus yet, right? There is no even developed breakbeat where it has its own bridges and stuff like that. There is none of that yet. You know, there is no even like rhyme style where it's got to be a specific battle opponent, things like that. What it would be, because majority hip hop recorded is battle rap. There is none of that. And it's like, I feel like they have to go back like that because the proofs that are right in front of them keep having people that are Puerto Rican. They keep being mixed in. And the ethnomusicological biggest flaw and the biggest loss in all this is that Black Americans lose the documentation of their own genius when you do that. You know what I mean? They do it with genres and they say, we made jazz all on its own and I don't want to hear anything about it though. But that's not where ethnomusicology goes. Yes, jazz is a Black American creation. But when you start to skip all of the interaction, it makes it look like Black Americans just popped out of their head, like a bubble popped out, and they just got the idea, a light bulb came, and they just made it. It takes away, when we study history, we're studying history for clues on how we can build our future greater. When you go back into the history of music, you're seeing the syncretism of the genius of Black Americans looking at the other Latino arts though, right? The other ways that music is being brought in. You understand? It's like in the documentary you had, look, John Storm Roberts' Latin tinge goes into all of this. Who else? The work of Ned Sublet. I mean, the work of Ned Sublet shows you how the clave, right? The clave is actually the same timing of the clave happens to be the same timing as boom, bap, original rap. You know what I mean? And he makes those suppositions, but that's through scholarship of over hundreds of years of documentation he goes through. And if we don't see how like the history of our musics have always been intertwined and have been adding on, then we don't see how hip hop is a great peak in really, and it sounds so cheesy now with everyone's hate on an all-time high, but the togetherness that was possible. You have to take away the years of the Ghetto Brothers. I saw some people supposedly disproving the worth of Africa Bambaataa, right? Listen, you want to say he's a piece of whatever because the alleged pedophilia, I'm with you 1,000%. But we have to talk about what he actually did too. And it disavowing, he wasn't the greatest DJ. He didn't do this DJing. He only had these records. Africa Bambaataa is not a founder because he found all these records and was the greatest DJ in the universe or the most innovative. Even though there are innovations, he had great crates for that time. The reason he's there is because he takes the baton of the unity that was made by Ghetto Brothers and others, Boricuas and Blacks, finally saying no to all this violence. These gangs can't just be fighting each other. There has to be some type of tolerance and then unity. But a lot of the unity is then achieved by the anger, the frustration, the hatred. All of the stuff that they say, no, Puerto Ricans couldn't have done anything with Blacks because they hate us and we have lots of hatred toward each other. It's disingenuous because we go back into the history to see that this was something that Blacks and Puerto Ricans really, really fought against. They fought against that hatred against each other, and they fought to bring some unity. They didn't just keep borders, but in the style of the FBA, the leadership of Tariq, right? The advocation of Lord Jamar, right? That type of leadership is the Trump style of leadership. It's for you, and we will build borders around it. We will build borders around it, and that's the way that we're going to build this. It'll be unacceptable though if anyone that is unlike this is in this cipher here. And that's crazy to me.
Now,
That's
how do
crazy.
you feel? How do you feel about, I've just seen over the past week where people have gotten pioneers on their platforms.
Yeah.
And pioneers are doubling down now and saying, no, I brought up a situation with the foundational crews. And, I spoke to a pioneer and somebody I rock with and I speak to, and he just doubled down. And his remark was, I didn't see them, therefore they weren't a thing. How do we respond to that with this whole, I didn't see them, so therefore they don't count. They're not valid. They made nobody was doing what they were doing. And that's impossible to me. Build
Yeah.
on it.
It's crazy. I saw parts of Doggy Diamond's interview with Raheem, right? And that's a perfect example. And you know what he said? He said in the music, I didn't see any of them doing anything. And as far as Graph and B-Boy, I don't know. And you know what I got out of that immediately was there's the whole problem though, right? And a lot of people are hitting me with that. Their arguments are so weak that they have to give the musical argument and disattach it. But the way they disattach it is when they disattach it, it's not only that the Graph and B-Boy, I don't know about it, it's that it doesn't matter anymore. And the music is what the thing is, So it's like this music doesn't actually happen unless people are playing for those particular dancers, unless they're playing for those dancers to do those specific things. And I just think it's so disingenuous that the one place where we really dominated, where I find it so disingenuous that you're saying that anyone was dancing in 1970s New York City and wasn't doing something that Puerto Ricans was doing. You were dancing in some way that we was doing, whether you were doing the more underground stuff, up rock, top rock, or you were doing the hustle or doing some type of mambo. Because those up top things that were done in mambo, salsa dancing and stuff, they are so complex up top that they are uniquely visualized. They are different. They look different. They're not the same. And it's like we have to repeat these things all the time. And I think it's so disingenuous. My expertise as a journalist into being a historian, to me, starts when I get my first printed page. And that's 1994 to me. The going back and saying the hip hop is this and that is my personal research to be a valid historian, to have the timeline correct. Because timelines overlap, right? Just like, for example, Crazy Legs did tons of great things in the 90s, 2000s, and onwards. So because the timelines overlap, we have to know. Because I'm talking about music, I have to know about soul music, but I also have to know about salsa music. I also think, like, he also said in that interview a very interesting thing. He said the Puerto Ricans were doing their own thing at the park jams, and they were just playing congas though, and then we were doing something else, right? Another one. We were the ones that were rhyming, and they named like legend great poets, right? You just had one Puerto Rican in Last Poets. They dismissed Felipe Luciano, one of the greatest writers, journalists, legend, and just dismiss him, throw him away. And they'll say, but we were doing poetry since then. So their early stuff that is immediate can impact them only. But Porter Crew's a solidified crew of poets that actually were doing poetry on music is actually predated by Puerto Ricans and not the Black Poets movement. Because the Nuyorican Poets movement doesn't start with the cafe. It starts years before, with all of them united and dominating the LES. And a lot of the schemes, a lot of the ways that they write are very rhyme syncopal syncopated, especially Miguel Pinheiro, the biggest like known one out of that group. Like the whole poem of the cause that he had to call the cause, that's those are bars. Those are bars. Those are performed in the way that we know them today. You know what I mean? A lot of cadence structure in there. The grittiness that goes in, they don't like that way. You know what I mean? When they have it like that, they could use it. When we have it, they overlook it, they skip it, they go back, and they skip a whole era. You know?
Yeah.
And it's more convenient now because we are very important in the socialization of the Bronx, the social reality. That's why I was telling you this. It's the Nuyorican connection. You know, one of my brothers, the God, piece of the God, Rio, he's telling me, listen, the way a Nuyorican lives is totally different than a Puerto Rican. We came here and we're not just doing Black culture along with Black Americans. We are infusing the nature by which we do our culture with theirs. The last knowledge, bits of knowledge we have of instruments. And look, a lot of people don't know the musical history. Musical history in the 1920s and 30s, some of the greatest musicians, as far as schooling goes, came from Cuba and Puerto Rico.
Yes.
So when jazz bands back then were looking for schooled musicians that they could pay quickly and they don't need them to rehearse, they'll be on time, they're professional, were coming from the Puerto Rican and Cuban base. The segregation that people say is like, oh, look, Puerto Ricans were here. No, segregation was the country segregating by shade. So depending on how they perceive me, I might be able to play. If I'm too light skinned, I might be playing the nice hotels and playing a very boring music. The darker brothers, and there's tons of scholarship out of the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. There's a big journal, thick journal of selected articles called Afro Latino, and it has all of that research in there, how the darker ones were going uptown to the jazz clubs and playing in those clubs. The history is unknown. The history is, I said, that this is a history of syncretism, and we were playing in there. So it's like, once we see the B-boys, right? DJs play what people want to play. And if you saying otherwise, you're lying. I just built with one of the great triple threats in music, J Live. He said the same thing. DJing is the hardest thing he does because he has to appease the audience at times. When he writes bars, when he produces, he don't have to do that. My brother DJ Toshi, same thing. They got to do a show. They're going to have to play some cuts that the people like, right? So how come all the cuts, though, have the style and the flavor that we mess with? Right. They have that vibe. How is the conga playing in the park jams not indulged? And this whole thing that Black Americans, we didn't know about that. You didn't know about that. You were poorly informed and poorly musically informed, because as the 70s go on into the 80s, the 90s, and into today, musical genres become more of an ownership for one type of person. So it doesn't matter that country and rock is Black created. It's going to be more in tune and focused and pitched and marketed for whites. This is going to be marketed toward Blacks. This is going to be marketed toward them. None of the musicians at that time are taking that ethos as the way that they make music. And I gave in the post, I said the greatest example is Miles Davis, a guy who's literally made up, we could say at least 5 subgenres in jazz, but hated, in his own words, in his own autobiography, hated the idea of genres and did not want his albums in the jazz section, especially when he was doing On the Corner in 72, when he was doing Bitches Brew, right? Those albums he did not want in the jazz section, and he felt he didn't get the sales from that. He was doing stuff with Jimi Hendrix. He was doing stuff with Sly. He didn't want to be in that section anymore. He wanted the bigger cuts of the rock musicians and the funk musicians. So when we look at all that, I think that also narrowed down people's mentality. Like, yo, this is the music I'm supposed to listen to. That's the music that they listen to. But in the community of the Bronx, that's not what was happening. One of my elders, and I name him for a lot of the 5% that acted like this is segregated like this, Allah B, Remember the Perfection. He passed away years ago. Knowledge Seed, for those that know, he was blacker than night. When we used to build, you know what his favorite musician was? Eddie Palmieri. And one 5%er trying to disagree at everything I was saying the Palladium black people didn't dance at the Palladium and they didn't go there. Are you crazy? The song Eddie Palmieri says himself, documented by Juan Flores, that Azúcar, one of his biggest early hits in '64, was altered to have more funk in the track, because the black Americans that danced on the night that they were there were asking him, could you put more funk in this? So a lot of people don't understand that a lot of the musicians in the bands were developing their albums based on the crowds that they played it to. Just like Willie Colon's El Juicio album, which is my favorite one of theirs, right? Before La Vogo solo. That album has such perfect musicianship compared to the ones before, even though they're great, because they were playing those songs again and again. And where did I hear that from? Willie Colon told me that directly. Directly told me that in the 2000s when I used to email him on his own message boards. And we would talk in behind in the emails from the message boards personally. So it's like, and you know what's funny? He told me that the clubs that hip hop goes into are all the clubs that he finished rocking, you know? So it's like there was an urban music going on. There was salsa, there was this, there was all these things happening. And if people are fronting, if they, you know, I as an aside, because I love salsa, Derrick, I love it. And if people are like, oh, I don't listen to all that crazy stuff and this and that. Listen, if you're just listening to salsa that's today and you don't listen to salsa back then and see how it really is funky, then you don't know Roberto Roena hizo Apollo sound, which is funky. One of the classic breaks, right? Que se sepas from there, right? His band. I mean, these bands had syncretism. The whole point of salsa was that they were merging other genres seamlessly in there. These are all precursors that you could do whatever you want. The less schooling that they had means the less rules that they had, you know? And so the scholarship is lost if you're not looking at how people dealt with other peoples and how they learned from other peoples and how they got from other peoples. So that musical story is just it's so wrong. It's so blatantly wrong. You know, like we find that, right? The Jimmy Castor saying where he got his timbales from. Begun. These are the canon, right? That's the canon. These are like these songs. But they have nothing to do with Puerto Ricans, though. Nothing. We had nothing to do with anything. We were just there standing around. And they say, like, oh, I'm not trying to be offensive. You're just standing around and you were participating. But if you're standing in the crowd, then participation is b-boying. If you're just standing around like dopes, then it's basically a condescending way of saying that you guys are dumb immigrants. You don't know English. You don't understand anything. And so you're standing there just saying nothing.
Yeah, I want to interject real quick. I got something on the screen. I want to sort of clarify with AF, where he says, you can read it. He says the Zulu Kings may have been the first. Seeing that's the problem. When we have the story that the Zulu Kings or the Zulu Nation was started in 73, we already know that's not a fact. The Zulu Nation, it's not even the Zulu Nation. It's the organization that is started in 75 upon the death of Bambaata's best friend, Solski. And so we have to get this stuff cleared up, right? So the Zulu Kings were not first. Hold on one second. Something happened here. I'm not sure what's going on. Just need a minute. Okay, he's probably got to go to the bathroom. So the Zulu Kings, make this clear. The organization begins in 75 with the death of Solski. The Zulu Kings do not begin until late 75, 76. Once again, for the umpteenth time, TBB is already breaking. They're already doing their thing. This is early 75. They're already doing their thing. So they predate This has nothing to do with because they're Puerto Rican that did the. We're talking the history. That's all we're talking. So we gotta stop these urban legends. That these were further. No, let's tell the story. I wanted to clarify that. And then what I wanted to say as we wait for Sunez to come back, what I wanted to say was you hear Eddie Palmieri's his song Azúcar, and you hear it, and this is what the Latin breakdown, really Barbito Garcia opened this up, where he showed the Harlem River Drive band, combined with Eddie Palmieri's band doing Azúcar. So you hear, the Latin funk. It meshes, it goes together. It's not this weird concept, it's not this weird connection. They just go together, they mesh together. And that's what we just need to look at, and I wanted Sunez to come and do this build to really speak to the misinformation based around, well, I didn't see it, therefore it didn't happen. That's not how history works. I'm a history teacher. You know how many things I didn't see? Do you know how many things none of us saw? Do we dismiss that and say, nah, that didn't happen, or that didn't happen, or that's crazy? We don't do that. None of us were there for George Washington. None of us were there for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, because I didn't see them, were you everywhere? Are you omnipresent? That's what I want to know. And you're not. None of us are. None of us were everywhere. So what's happening over here, and what's funny, Sunez, yesterday in the live I did, I played a clip from Stanley, Green Eye Stanley, because everybody was saying, no, I never heard of those crews. And so Green Eye Stanley sent me a message and said, Doc, I know you're telling the truth because I was over there. And a lot of the dudes from Bronx River and Bronxdale, they weren't over there. I was over there. So I know those crews existed. So I'm going to let you keep cooking. But, this. So how did you feel? So you saw the Raheem interview. Talk a little bit more about that. What do you think Doggy Diamonds is after? It seems like he's after something. And I'm not sure what it is.
I think he's like everyone. He's after the easy pitch, saying that, listen, Puerto Ricans. Here's why. Like, I would say, I'm going to give a journalist perspective in hip hop, and I would, where they could refute it because they can't. But where a lot of people get things wrong about hip hop is because they go to the music and they say, well, where are the Puerto Rican MCs? Where are all the artists that are Puerto Rican? I don't see them anywhere, and things like that. And they have no idea of the struggles of what it was. Now, I said that you get genres being defined, genres being limited, genres in their own space, but that also changed the way that things are marketed. Things are marketed so easy. Now, look, this doesn't hurt just, okay, black artists, we have our own genre, so we don't need to worry about that. They do. Because some of the most exceptional artists, from Miles Davis to Nina Simone, were they had great difficulties with music. They had such great difficulties selling their music because they had jazz elements, they had funk elements, they had all types of elements, and whatever experimental aspects they wanted to throw in. And I see it today. I see it today when I document music, that I have to put people in a progressive box so that way people can respect it and then take a look at it as if it is seen as progressive, right? When we get into the industry, by the mid 80s, there's not even the idea of Latinos being in there. The first Latinos that are recorded are from the West Coast, but they were doing Spanglish. They were doing something that they could say, listen, we could sell it as a hybrid to the market, the Latin market. You know what I mean? And give them the trouble of trying to work that. Or maybe we could luckily tap into it. But that's not what happened with all of the MCs that tried to rap. I have heard this story documented from Fat Joe directly, Q Unique, Destroy, Prince Power Rule, right? The first Puerto Rican signed to a label on his own, right? One of the first, right? They all said the same thing. The fact that they got deals was an aberration, not the regular. It had nothing to do with their skills. It had nothing to do with their techniques. And then add upon that, labels themselves don't really want to sell the most gritty form of the music. So you don't just have Puerto Ricans not even being able to get in, but the great black musicians that are trying to do something really great, it can't be too progressive either. This also changes the more that people start learning the lyrics. You know, the more that they learn the lyrics, the more that they learn the problems with the lyrics. So now when you get like an Afro-centered message, right? An Afrocentric message of the 90s, right? We think it's positive. We think it's great. They stopped it with gangster rap. But that, even that Afrocentric time, that time where there was Afrocentric music, the X-Clan, let's say KRS-One, right? Brand Nubian, huh? Peace to Low Brother, Sadat X. All of those groups, Poor Righteous Teachers, they were building, but they were building exclusively. So someone, when, let's say, for example, they was 5%ers on record, but they wasn't even building about all of the original people that they're supposed to be teaching. They kept it solely on African American. So a lot of the stuff that we see was packaged. It was packaged. You see, he's a 5% MC though, and he's talking about this. But Poor Righteous Teachers, though, they didn't talk to anybody that wasn't Black American. Their lyrics didn't talk to me. But when you step to them in the street and say, who was the original man? They're like, oh yeah, peace to the God. You see, now in 2024, it's more vitriol because they can't do that to me. You know what I mean? The history, because of what I've done just in the 5% nation, the history of that nation cannot be told this entire century, the 2000s, the 2010s and the 20s. You can't tell it without me in there. So now people know this isn't just about one indigenous people, one people of African descent. It's all of them. And now all of this goes against all of that. This is all for the idea that, listen, we got to all stick together. This is all for the reparations. This is all for the movement. They got to know that we've foundations to everything. So they take the gimmick of foundation and apply it to everything. That's why I said it's an extreme of the limitation, an extremity taken upon the limitation of scholarship. The scholarship only focused on first. And so they left it on first when they get to the music. And it's poor scholarship. None of these people know music. None of these people ever heard music. None of these people were with musicians at all. At all. If you were with a musician that really knew their music, you know that their eclectic nature would already be naturally including all of the other original people that they would be listening to. It never is that dull. So we have people that are poor musically that are doing this, you know, and it's a real shame, because the magic of the FBA, and I have to say, because they led this with the style of Miss Scholarship. Everybody was okay with him saying he's the first B-boy. Didn't say anything. I can't find anything about it. Said, how did these moves develop though? Right? Oh, what gave you the idea for Uprocking? Because you know it's going to be the crazy fantasy story. If he goes, oh, well, you know, one day I was just, you know, and I just came with it though. And how'd you get to the floor? Well, you know, stuff that took years to develop, he thought of that in one day. No, just don't keep it to that. Just keep it saying you were the first one there and you didn't see any Puerto Ricans though. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yo, we're Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. And when I go into a place and I say, I'm not sure what he is, or let me see, I go talk to a brother. Let me see if he's Puerto Rican. We got to go talk to him. Mm-hmm. We don't judge somebody though. He got to be doing something blatantly and we say, oh, you know, I think he's Puerto Rican. But even we misfire. Our people come in all the shades.
I
Our people
think
come in all the shades, you know?
I think, one of the things that is in the chat, one of the things that I think is important to understand is that, when we hear people like Lord Jamar, who said something a number of years ago, but then he's changed his position based around he believes new information, right? This happens all the time, right? We learn and we grow. That's just part of living.
Mhm.
So they don't apply that same litmus test to people like Track Two, people like those guys, because they go back to saying, well, they said this over here and now they're saying this, now they're lying.
Mhm.
No, when Track Two said, well, I always said the Zulu Kings were first because that's what I was taught. It's the rumor of the streets. So a lot of people were taught that this is who was first. But when you understand the story and you hear it, you hear somebody like Charlie Rock come out and tell you, no, 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 that they're not even around at that time. So that's an impossibility. Then you say, okay, well, let me dig a little bit deeper. See, a lot of people within this conversation are not, they don't view this scholarly. They're not researching. They're looking and taking sound bites from video. Bro, you spoke on, I want you to speak to this because you wrote that. So many people use these sound bites.
Right.
Speak
Sound
to that.
bites. Yeah. When I learned this with Dr. Juan Flores, one of the great scholars. We would be a research assistant, and I was thinking I was a writer. I'm starting to write, and I'm thinking I'm dope. Like, I know how to do this, but he's showing me stuff, and they were doing multiple interviews with old school artists, people that say that they were in hip hop. And I remember looking through some of the transcripts and say, yo, this is good enough. I'm just thinking like copy. I'm thinking copy, like the amount you have. I'm like, this is enough to like put in a book. Like, we good. He's like, it's not good enough. It doesn't answer all these questions. It leads it to speculation. We need to probe further, right? So if somebody says this is their anecdotal experience, what they saw only, then they have to detail exactly what they saw. You see? So like somebody says, look, Sunez, your experience though in hip hop, right, is anecdotal too. So I said, well, what do you know about? Well, I know the music that was released, and I went to the places where they were releasing the music. And so these are the details I have. So the farther away from, let's say, New York, the less my anecdotal experience fits that play. I don't know exactly how it went, even though I speak to a lot of MCs outside of New York, right? So it have diminishing returns though of the credibility. They didn't look at any of this like this. They just interview somebody, he says it, and then it's good. Well, you were there, right? Okay, you're good. And it's like, yo, how does it, like I said, people don't really get how every entertainer that goes up on a stage validates the audience differently. Some entertainers go deep into the crowd and look. A lot of them don't. A lot of them aren't even seeing all of the crowd, especially a crowd that is fluctuating, especially a crowd that is different. I mean, it's impossible. And I think using sound bites, and I always bug out with the Charlie Chase sound bites because they're totally different from what a younger Charlie Chase was saying when I was looking at these transcripts back then. The transcripts back then coming out of Center for Puerto Rican Studies had more sincerity to the difficulties he had in making music and being accepted despite having massive amounts of innovative content, innovative ideas that he was bringing to the table. He goes, these interviews that are sound bites, the interviewers, these podcast personalities, they're doing interviews as if they're being called as a witness on a stand. Answer me this, yes or no. Were the Puerto Ricans there? And it's like, for me, like, if he was there, then they were there. If this brother was there, they were there. So, and you know, again, it's all about the syncretism and what people are admitting. I think it's so disingenuous, though, that Black Americans don't admit that a lot of the cadence and structure of their rhyme doesn't just come from their history, immediate Black American history, but it also comes from the Caribbean on both sides, the Spanish and the English. It comes from both sides. We have a way of cadence, though, that is totally different with English than they do. You know what I mean? Just like Jamaicans, Haitians, and the English side of the Caribbean, they have a completely different of cadence, though. And if you're acting like they didn't take that, you're bugging. Because to this day, the biggest, most powerful battle rap song ever is in a Jamaican patois. You know? And if they don't know that one, that's more history than mine. That's basic stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just really wild to me. And it's basically shunning a whole history. I've even heard stuff like, "Lo, it doesn't even matter if you were there, Sunez. It doesn't matter if Puerto Ricans were there. We would have came up with it anyway. So it was like it was worthless that you were there." Now that's a type of scholarship that is even more devious and unscholarly. So you're saying that if Puerto Ricans weren't there, you would have made it up anyway. So they're saying to me, first of all, we're not talking about history now. Now we're talking in the quantum realm of possibilities, multi-universe. We're in the multiverse with them now in scholarship. Because now they say, listen, all that stuff you said, all this up rock stuff and the Apache line and all the confrontation, we would have came up with that anyway. So it doesn't even matter that Puerto Ricans were there. So it's a way of dismissing. If Puerto Ricans did invent something, it was in the guise and service, in the guise and in the service of the greater cipher, which was the Black American cipher claimed, right? This is why I said so many of them sound so white to me. Because when you guys got mad, when Ken Burns, I remember when Ken Burns did his jazz and they gave a whole episode to Buzz Biederberg, and you guys are like, he's not even that influential compared to all the Black musicians they left out. They named all these guys. They gave too much time to Chet Baker. By the way, both Biz and definitely Chet are dope musicians. I like them. But they gave too much time. We don't need the Brubeck. We don't need Biederberg. We don't need this, right? We don't need Chet Baker. But then you guys do it. Because when Ken Burns does something like that, it allows him to say this was an American genre that was made, and whites had the same play as the Black Americans. And yes, that's what I call getting it stolen. But in this history, it's totally different. They're dismissing the actual inventions and innovations, not just like a star player, not just a star DJ, not just a star B-boy, not just a superstar that comes out of nowhere, you know, or can be seen as an anomaly, you know, because everything has it. There's a Larry Bird in everything, right? But in hip hop, that's just not the case. It's wrong scholarship. It's wrong scholarship. It's a whole litany of stuff that was done in those rockers were doing that gets transferred, that gets brought everywhere. And what's sad is that we lose our history. When I was a kid, I didn't know what any of that stuff looked like. When I saw top rocking when I was a little kid, and it was already 80s. So they had like B-boy elements. It's in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, but there were a lot of biker gangs in Sunset Park. Once you get down to 3rd Avenue and stuff, all the clubs are there. So, and I had relatives that lived there. So you would pass by and they were exotic. They were like dangerous, you know what I mean? And we would pass by and we would see confrontation. And I just always assumed that it was a fight. I never noticed that this might be this might be that. I was too young to understand what I was looking at. You do more research, you say, oh, wait, that's why they was wearing the same things. They had the same jacket on. I just thought that he was mad because of liquor. You know, I'm just assuming like this is how it was in my family. So I'm like, yo, they must be just drank too much liquor and they're arguing about a woman or something else. You don't understand. So it's real disingenuous that an entire Puerto Rican history that gives so much validity to this idea that hip hop becomes this wonderful, united countercultural force against all of the oppression. That's to me always been the possible peak of hip hop, to be a countercultural force to all that is wrong, to speak out to all that is wrong. We certainly were dancing in such a way that was telling you something is wrong. When I was a kid, it's 80s, it's the early 80s, so we're getting things that are brought to us, but it was all about b-boying, and that's what appealed to me the most as a young b-boy. I wasn't, I wasn't good enough like that, but a lot of the anger, the fury that I had, everything, it was able to be expressed. There's no other dance forms that you could find that do that, unless it's a set choreographed dance in a show. You don't see that being performed in that way. Musics don't get performed. The Caribbean genres, English or Spanish, they are not performing that way. Merengue is not performed that way. Even to a lot of extent, though, the genres that have it like that aren't brought to the masses. And where do you find those? The ones that are like that they aren't brought, they're coming from Latin America. They're coming from the Caribbean. The bomba, the rumba colombiana, which is very confrontational, right? Which very much reacts to the drum and is a real talkative form of dance to the drum. So it's like they dismiss all of this. And what happens is that because my journey as a music writer is I want everybody to love music by wanting to hear everything. That's always been my addiction. I want to hear everything. And when you narrow everything down, people aren't listening to everything. It ruins the music because now people have less to sample, less to mine. They're literally going to go in and make music and say, I'm not sampling that. Those are those Puerto Ricans doing that. Oh, look, the credits, they have a Latino in there. I'm not sampling that. Like they're going to deliberately not use stuff that they could really kill and make something great with, because now that prejudice that have been infused inside of them have been called upon. And look, they can't find, it's led by FBA, and the magic is that FBA names themselves after the title they want you to have. So now when you insult the FBA organization, right? Because we're finally on Fat Joe insulted the leader and the FBA organization and its doings, right? But because they're so clever that the name of the organization is the title they want you to take, you can now attach any insult to the organization to you. It's just magical what they have done. And I mean in the most evil type way, how anything now is attacking that. And what they have brothers doing and sisters doing is they don't attack you on breaking down everything. They have you attacking on emotional pleas. So they go, it's always, the conversation continues to start. I don't care how scholarly I thought they were. It starts out, but listen, Sunez, the Black Americans are the ones that get the most hell. We don't get loved by anybody, this and that. And I'm like, yo, there's two ways you can teach things. You know what I'm saying? We could teach, what I teach is a knowledge of self. We could teach a knowledge of self and say, listen, don't they hate you? Don't they do things against you? You got to see them as the devil. That's how you see yourself as the God. But that's not the way I teach. Who anyone else is has nothing to do with who you are. You know what I mean? Let's say we do righteousness and we take the devil off our planet. There's no more devilishment, though. Then you have no more purpose, no more reality, no more responsibility to the world that you said you created. That's not the way we teach here. So all this emotional stuff is saying, listen, the Black Americans almost maligned. Listen, there's a thing that we were taught, right? There's a thing that we were taught, and we were taught like the original man is the black man, but the black man we were taught is the black, brown, yellow seed. So the word black meant many deeper meanings to us, not just shade. It was black, brown, yellow shade, and that's why the flag goes black to gold, because the points mean the original people, black to yellow, right? So the black and gold is on the flag. When you look at all that, we were taught by our elders to go for the black, brown, and yellow, for the black to always roll with a brown and a yellow, and for the yellow to roll with a brown and a black. Because we were taught that our social realities are always going to be different. You know, if I'm by myself, I'm going to get some hell from people that are racist and whatnot. But I'm also going to get devilishment and racism in a different kind of way if I'm with my blacker brother. We know that. We know that when I'm with my brother Amare, who's a black seed, he's going to get hell and I get a little bit less. Mm-hmm. These are not privileges, levels of white privilege that the different shades get. These are allowances. And when we was really, really unified in this hip hop, we realized that whatever oppression gave us, me a little bit less hell at certain moments and not others, gave the blacker brother hell at nearly every moment, doesn't make me and him different. It makes our reality different. But when we understand it, we know how to roll together. This is why hip hop was such a big deal. This is these teachings were things that even if when Bambaataa was making his unity lessons, this is why a lot of 5%ers were saying the unity lessons, those things sound like what we was doing. And they didn't like it because, we're about originality, right? So we were like, nah, you can't be just taking and using. But he was doing it in some type of good measure. There was goodwill to it. But that kind of goodwill is what the Ghetto Brothers and the hells that the blacks and browns were fighting against and trying to unify gangs. This is the next step that Bambaataa took. That entire history is being erased in simple ignoring. As if all that happened was black people were poor, black Americans, they got together and made a genre. They don't even care about the b-boying. And I heard someone tell me that the b-boying, that's nothing. That's just fads. Dancing is just a fad. Yo, when you do that, you take away and spit on the entire African history. An entire African history of communication and mental development. Because we mentally develop through the drum, physically, orally, right? You know what I mean? And orally. I mean oral, like oral sound, and orally, verbally. Like all of this is part of our development that was next level. Revolutionary. Whether you could read, and if you want scholars, read the works of Dr. Jacob Carruthers, last chapter in Intellectual Warfare. People think we're coming out here and we don't have books, papers, and the collected anecdotal evidence cross-reference to show and prove that we was here. And we should have never been doing this because black Americans just are out there saying we did it ourselves and just spitting on us. And see, that's where it gets crazy. Because it's not people I could deal with people from Tennessee and Alabama tweeting me some dumb stuff. But we're getting it from brothers that was here. Brothers that was in Brooklyn telling me that the uprock, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's funny because they give me the WAP, the Cabbage Patch, all these other dances that do not predate that and that aren't even of the era that we're talking about. That's wonderful. And you thought that you weren't going to make new dances. Well, the music, you were the only ones making the music, getting the music recorded. And it's a terrible lesson of music because today's young need to be taught that music was something that had to be allowed to be made. I don't care what anyone says. If you compare music today and back then, we could argue about the quality. But today, music does not need anyone's allowance to be made. It needs your decision to say, I'm putting this on Bandcamp. I don't care. Right? Back then, every single recorded work, like 95% of it, needed to be given through a label. So unless you were like, and then that's where the undercurrent, as a side note, that's where the undercurrent of a lot of illegal stuff goes on, because who were the underwriters to a lot of music that couldn't get out there?
Not to cut you off.
Who was making the studio?
Let me do this real quick. I want you to keep talking. I want to give people the opportunity in the chat to ask you some questions. So I'm gonna do it this way. First of all, Sunez, are you open to questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you have a question for Sunez about the Nuyorican contributions to hip hop culture, or anything that he might have mentioned, first of all, keep it respectful, but write in the chat, please write question so we know that's a question. I can't go through everything. So we'll start now. If you have a question, write question and then ask your question, and I'll put it on the screen for him to, be able to build with you. All right, keep going, my brother.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to knock all the points that was in there, in that post. And one of the other things that
Listen, why don't we just go here, bro? Listen, we're here. Why don't we go here? You're 5%. Lord Jamar claims he's 5%. How do you feel about, as 5%ers, the way he is?
Right.
What are your thoughts? What is the nation's thoughts?
I didn't get into, right now, he was trying to roast me too. Like I was big mad. He was telling me on the Instagram, because I posted it on the Instagram as well, and the Facebook, and I was big mad and this and that. And I'm like, my first answer to him and anyone that thinks so is, if you're trying to get at me as a 5%er, you better get your muscles right, because you're in the wrong league here. You're really in the wrong league here. I have a lineage, just like my martial art lineage. I could trace my lineage with this knowledge back to the root, for real. Yeah. It wasn't passed down to me where I got it and then was just getting it online, or somebody threw me some lessons and stuff. I was really with the elders that started this. To teach a class at a law school in Mecca, the longest running class in the history of that school, every single person that was alive and is alive that ever taught there, I built with. So my pedigree is strong. Lord Jamal's first thing that he did directly for the nation was his 5% album. And he gets the liner notes written by Michael Muhammad Knight. Michael Muhammad Knight, someone that was a white man that decided to embed himself, because we teach all the human families. He embedded himself into the nation like he was one of us, was taught and was brought and was embraced by the first white 5%er that ever existed, Azrael, who passed away, right? And Azrael, I remember Azrael coming to me, how he was so disappointed in how his work, pseudo-scholarly work, only wrote gossip. It only repeated things he told him in confidence, and didn't document anything that we teach about this nation. And consequent books after that have continued to get so many things wrong. He can't even get the RZA, the Jizza, and you God correctly in the books. You know what I mean? He can't even get that basic information that a woo head would get right, let alone the knowledge.
We got a question.
This is who he's got. So his work in this doesn't start from the get. People ask me to debate him. I'm not debating someone that, when he had his flat earth promoting, he had a flat earth debate because he deals with a flat earth, and he was destroyed by my brother Minister Freedom. He went and started going and talking about the man's genitals, or telling that man to go to his genitals, on that level of insult. So this is the type of emotionalism we have.
We have a question. Here it is. So Cuban Crisis, he says, Sunez, can you expound on how the father saw colorism, racism, etc.?
There was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first Puerto Ricans that ever got knowledge of self was a guy, he's still alive, Allah Shasha. Because he expected a lot out of me. So he was really hard on me, right? And he used to get stuff, and he used to get insults from other gods that would tell him, you're half original, you're light skinned, you're not really the original man, this and that. And mind you, Puerto Ricans weren't the only ones that got it. Light skinned Black Americans got it too. Okay. And he used to get that. And he went up to the father and he said, listen, Allah, like, they're telling me all this stuff, like, it's wrong, it's not right. And he goes, yeah, I know. What you need to do is go teach your people so that they understand this whole truth, and it'll come back to them. So his immediate answer was, let teach it well to the people that will understand. Those that don't understand, I'll just be left by the wayside. That was always his thing. It wasn't he never taught us to teach confrontationally, where we're trying to evangelize something and get it into their brain. Like, you will accept me for this. It's the same reason why I don't be like, okay, Lord Jamal, let's debate. Because first of all, he's debated on levels where you would never say that stuff to me in a room. So you're not going to get on, you know, on the stream and think you could say that to me. You know, we're going to do this respectfully. We're going to do this scholarly. But at the same time, I don't respect the scholarship. I think that he hasn't had scholarship yet. He's only had sound bites. So it's really just easily diffused.
Did the father? So the question again: how did the father view Father Allah? How did he view?
He was very against that. He was very against that, and the whole point was that we are all original. Remember, there's nobody telling black people that they're God, and there's nobody telling them that the black man is God, meaning that black one, the very black one, the brown one, and the yellow one. He was the only one teaching that. So to even teach that, you had to get rid of certain colorism that you already had in your mind. You see, I told you the first white 5% was Azrael. It was the father who taught Azrael because they were in Mattawan mental health institution, and he saw that he had a lot of heart, and he taught him. And he taught him, listen, the white man is not God, but you're a righteous man, and any man has a right to be righteous. And so he taught him. And so like we were always taught that we are neither pro-black nor anti-white. We are pro-righteousness and anti-devilishment. You see? And when people make these markers like that are not even founded on any type of scholarship, they fall, to me, to my understanding, they've fallen victim already. You know?
Here's the second question. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but
yeah, what is the African-American contribution to the development of hip-hop? Dr. Marceliana Morgan is the founder of the world's first hip-hop archive at Harvard University. She's listen, that is an endless question. See, that question, we're in the defensive, you know? So I think if the scholarship went right, we would be studying how the Black American hits a peak with hip-hop to me, and is able to blend all of these other things from all these other original people and make a cohesive structure of a culture that is able to demand things in their lyrics, in their expression. You know, I think that's the genius peak that comes out of jazz, because if you study jazz, this is something that even Ralph Ellison, the legendary author of Invisible Man, the novel, he wrote jazz writings too. And he said that jazz has an ethos. This is him saying it. He don't know nothing about no hip hop. He's not even writing during hip hop. He said ethos jazz is that you learn how to play the instrument the technical way, the right way. But to be a jazz musician, you have to be original and creative and express something unique to it that no one else has. Then you're a jazz musician. So when we talk about hip hop, to me, the Black American is slowly building up an ethos that explodes. That ethos of original creativity. For all the stuff we're talking about hip hop, to me, that's the most important thing in hip hop. Original creativity. And to me, hip hop and what the Black American peaked with that, because it peaks through the documentation, the work, because the work of Amiri Baraka, that fortifies those ethos. To me, they explode and they peak and they become the absolute requisite, where no, we don't even allow people to be unoriginal in any kind of smidgen. I think if hip hop doesn't have that ethos, then it's totally debunked. And to me, it's the Black American genres continuing slowly to put that out there as a necessary ethos. So yeah, we could go all day with what they contributed, but to me, that's the most important thing. I really do. I really think that's the most important thing. And to me, that's the biggest thing you can have.
Okay. Second, read that question. There goes another question from Akeem.
This is not even a question about hip hop. That's the universal flag that I'm wearing, though. That's a flag. That's a question that we can answer in my many classes and things like that. But listen, the flag is owned as we defend it. As we live it out, we defend it. We don't need to go under a government decree to tell us how to defend what is ours. As simple as that.
Respect. Yeah, respect. I like how you did that. Let's
Yeah,
keep
because
it
it's
on
not a hip
topic.
hop question. That's
Yeah,
not
let's
really.
keep it on topic. Yeah, I like that.
Mm.
Let me see if I find any more questions. Let me see. I need a Berlin band. Okay. Let me see if there's any more questions. Okay. Question. Okay, so yeah, these are more. Let's keep the questions about. So here, let's do this, guys. The questions need to be regarding the Nuyorican contribution to hip hop culture. What are your questions about that? Yay or nay? And but ask him a question. We're not talking about the 5%ers. We're not. We're talking about the culture. Let's deal with that. Puerto Ricans in the culture.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's deal with that. Just that. We build on a Thursday. I'm at a law school in Mecca every Thursday.
Okay, let me see if I find another question. Let me see. Okay, yeah, Akeem, you're not listening. Okay, so okay, let's stop asking questions about the 5%ers. Let's ask hip hop questions. That's what we want to ask. Okay, so I'm gonna give it another 5 minutes. Um, and if there's no other questions regarding this topic, we're gonna just call it a day. I think it was a good build. I think we covered, unless soon as you feel like there's more to cover that you want to speak to, um, please feel free. Right. So let me just see what it is. We're just looking to see if there's any more questions about hip hop, Puerto Ricans in hip hop, the culture, the beginning, all of that. Okay. Okay. So why do you not see more? Okay. So here's a question. Soon as when you get back, I know you're off camera for a minute. So there is a question there for him, and I'm gonna let him answer that.
Let's see. Let's see. Why do we not see more Puerto Rican influence if they were so involved? Well, that again, this question really has to do with the idea that Puerto Ricans weren't really allowed to get on the labels. You know what's interesting, right? It took till 1996 though, and it was a failed venture, but it was very interesting in my development early. When I was early in my career in 1996, I was an intern at All Our Recordings. A lot of people don't know this label, right? And it was by Jelly Bean Benitez, right? HOLA, Home of Latino Artists, right? And in that label, he tried to get Latino artists though, but by then we were so pigeonholed in like this is hip hop, and you guys do freestyle, that it was very early versions of reggaeton. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
it was disgusting to me. I was just like, this is not what I want to see. But I realized, and mind you, I took a lot of, as an intern, Jelly Bean took a liking to me, and I would just like hang out with him for a little bit. You know what I mean? And he would tell me like how difficult it was to do this hip hop thing, because he knew I was a hip hop head, and I'm looking at his artists. I'm like, yo, I just want some raw hip hop here. Like we have like this guy singing. They had an R&B a quartet. You know what I mean? I would call it like a Boys to Men version in Spanish, not in Spanish, but Latino Boys to Men kind of thing. It was just mirroring the other genres, but there was no hip hop, and it was like they can't express themselves fully in there. You know what I mean? And they always felt uncomfortable to express themselves if they had certain things they said. Certain MCs were told not to, if you speak, you can't speak Spanish. You can't throw Spanish lyrics in there, like a little Spanglish, a little that. Fat Joe himself told me, this is how wild it got. Fat Joe told me himself that he was being pitched and being pushed by his A&R man to be a freestyle singer. Can you imagine Fat Joe dancing? I'm just saying, like him doing no, look, no. That is That's not the look.
Yeah, it
Let alone
sounds
that he
crazy.
can't sing anyway. His voice is not that. That's not his voice. This is what was the problems that was going on in hip hop. And when I was in the Source in 2005, right? And we did like a piece to honor like fallen rappers, and each cover had a stained glass cover. If you know, you know. Eazy-E, Tupac, Biggie, and Pun, right? That was the four. And of course, I was one of the editors, and they gave me Pun to handle. And in the beginning, I kept writing that Pun was Pun comes from the borough where Boricuas co-created hip hop. It wasn't a white editor; it was a black editor, Black American editor, who kept erasing that. And I said, "Why do you keep erasing that?" And she said, "No, because it's Black Americans created this." And I said, "Where have you been? Like, where are you? Where are you from?" Like, and mind you, they didn't have the expertise in hip hop. So like we're going like, oh, because they know, because it's an FBA creation. They never even went to the Bronx though. Like they don't even know which trains go up there. A lot of these people in the magazines, they wasn't even in the hip hop. They didn't catch shows. They didn't catch anything, So they weren't people in hip hop. They were media that was just using that as a springboard to the greater media. Whereas at my career, I'm where I want to be. Like I've gotten things to go up to other things, but that's not where I want to be. I'm here writing about hip hop music. That's where I always wanted to be. And you couldn't get the Puerto Rican to talk about his things. As the years went on, it became more difficult to market a Puerto Rican. And that's not a Puerto Rican hip hop thing only. Look at the movies. Your build yesterday, Derrick, when you talked about the AAA. Yeah. I'm like, there were 100 Puerto Ricans and they couldn't put one sister in there.
Yeah.
They couldn't put one Boricua sister in the movie. Wild, just wild to me. And it's like we have in America, the Puerto Rican has the Nuyorican. I put it like that for my man Rio. The Nuyorican has a special cultural experience of bringing everything he learns about being Boricua from Borinquen, and everything that they learned from the Black American, sees the linkages, right? We see the comparisons and the like-mindedness between Pedro Albizu Campos and Malcolm X, right? We see the colonialism versus oppression and slavery, right? We see all these connections. We do the boogaloo. We do all of these things together, alike, right? Inspired. And we still don't come out in the movies. We don't come out in film. We are not documented. And so we are easily thrown away. The problem is that now you're trying to do it with hip hop, and we're not keeping silent. We're not keeping silent about this because it's enough already. This is really what has, the truth is that's for Nuyorican reality. It is hip hop and what we have contributed to the creations of the hip hop culture in the most important elements in its foundation. That has been a springboard to the nature by which we have engaged all other arts and culture in the last 40 to 50 years.
There's another question. Andrina's Casa. Can you read it?
Yeah. Do I feel that Puerto Ricans have been under-documented in hip hop? I mean, absolutely. I couldn't write about Puerto Ricans. I had to write about other things. You know what I mean? I remember when I got Capital Punishment, Big Pun's album, and it was like, this is big, man. You're gonna give me a lot of words, right? And it was like, nah, you're gonna get 300. So I had to write about like really what ended up being the biggest album in Puerto Rican MC history, right? We could argue that, right? Easily. And I got 300 words. And the fly stuff that I wrote in the top, because my stuff has always been about that fly art, writing some type of poetry prose that makes my work unique, got skimmed off the top like frosting on a cake. And it just ended up being, and when I went to them and I said, yo, y'all should give this the whole XXL. That's not the writer's choice. So it was just the XL, and it was just seen as okay. Like no one really understood when we finally expressed our reality. And then we had like an MC, and why Big Pun was such an important MC is because he had his cadence and his style of MCing was an extreme version of the Puerto Rican cadence, tempo, and mastery of rhythms all put into a verbal package. You know, the
Absolutely.
way he's, in the simplest way to put it, because I've written this many times, the way that Pun spoke English is the way that Puerto Ricans from the island speak Spanish. It was fast, it was melodic, and it was endless. And he captured that in English, which was ridiculous. There's only a couple of other MCs that are Puerto Rican that I've seen capture it like that. But this is where it gets underreported, because if I wrote all that, nobody gets to read that. No one. No one wants to read that. So it was underreported, you know?
There's another question.
We got thrown away from b-boying. No one put it. Can you explain the parallels between the creation of Boogaloo as an NYC musical genre? Well, I consider salsa to be the first urban genre of New York City, where you could say it is distinct enough from son. And I find when the great legendary salsa musicians consider salsa just the same thing as son, it's because they only look at son musically and not lyrically. Because I'm coming from a hip hop background, musically I listen to lyrics first, then the music. That's just me as a writer, as someone documenting. So to me, salsa had the stories and the stylings of the people that were on those streets of the Bronx and Spanish Harlem. And to me, that's what makes it unique, especially once you get Lavo adapting a very pro Jibaro, right? Pro, basically like hick, you know, man of the mountains, farmer type vibe, and that you know, campo vibe to being proud about it, which was something that Puerto Ricans in New York were not, and being very outlandish. He's like a precursor to MCing. And if you don't know Lavo's lyrics, know that to simply put, a salsa song of back then was the set lyrics of the song, whatever subject it was, then the chorus would be bar, chorus, bar. So the two bars would rhyme. So you have the two bars between the chorus rhyming. And when it's performed, they're making this up as they go along. So guys like Ismael Rivera, right? Cheo Feliciano, Celia Cruz, they're all making these lyrics up as they go along in song. And Lavo's were very fiery, right? He had songs like Es Sonero Mayor, like I'm the best sonero, you know? So it was like, that was like early MCing to me. When I first heard it, that was the first thing I told Willie. I was like, Willie, like the stuff you made with Lavo is like rap. And he was mad at me. He was like, don't compare me to rappers, you know, and they curse and all that and stuff. And I was like, no. And when I explained to him, he was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Because he told me, and just to put the parallels, he told me that one time when they had the album cover, the one before El Juicio, I'm forgetting the name of it, Cosa Nuestra, where they have like the dead body, but it's in the base case, you know what I mean? Like they buried the bodies like that, and you know, instead of the music case, it's really like a gun, like all those metaphors and the imagery. He said that they used to get challenged in the club if they were really real like that. And they got into fights because people thought they were tough guys, you know? That sounds very familiar, right? That sounds like hip hop. You're getting tested for your lyrics now. Because Lavo's lyrics were really like that. He was saying he was the toughest. And I could tell you, Derrick, off camera, but like he was even telling me what who other soneros he was dissing on the records was. And and I was like, that's crazy. So like Boogaloo was the blend of salsa instrumentation, right? The complexity of polyrhythms, right? Simply put, conga, bongos, and timbales, and all of the vegetables, the maracas, the guiras, all at the same time, but with a very funky cadence, a very funky style. So with the funk, the funk is very similar to salsa, but funk focuses on the beat more directly. You know, where the beat in salsa is made by that collage of polyrhythms, whereas the beat in the funk is isolated and brought forth. So they're very similar. That's why they blend well together. But Boogaloo is a combination of that and some more English lyrics, you know. But guys like Lavo, they didn't even like Boogaloo because Boogaloo was in English and singing in Spanish was considered militant. You know? So
I have a question.
It's a lot of stuff that overlaps. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I'm gonna end here, brother, because I gotta run. But I have a final question.
Absolutely.
we said a lot. You said a lot
Indeed,
today,
indeed.
right? A lot of good stuff. If you could send a message to the New York pioneers who were in microphone check, who are saying, no, 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 what would that message be to them?
Um, the first message I would say was like, what was the whole point of hip hop? What was the whole point that said, listen, this is not something I'm doing because I perform it well, but on a deeper level, why do I continue to need to make this and share with everyone back then? You know, was the entire point was to unify people, right?
Mhm.
Wasn't the ethos of original creativity founded on being creative, but also like the great gangster guru, Remember the Perfection, said, give the credit where the credit is due, was such a big deal. That was an ethos that I found so honorable that to me that made being a hip hop journalist honorable. Was I finally have a profession where I could give the credit where the credit is due on this music, and at least in the expertise that I'm following. And they go back there. What about all the comrades that were with you that were Boricua, that were doing this out of the love, who all of our parents hated it, and we were still doing it and had a place to go and a place to express ourselves. And they were together, Derrick, in a time period where they're expressing themselves in a way where the expression is growing and developing day by day. And every next day, they're able to express themselves even greater. And you didn't have the love to say, that man was there expressing himself special right there. We saw those guys doing the up rock. You saw that. You saw the Boricuas doing the up rock, the top rock. Because people was going borough to borough doing things. Brothers, look, brothers is not just Mets fans, and I'm a Mets fan. Brothers was going to Yankee Stadium. They was seeing things. They was going up there. Us Boricuas, we had relatives everywhere. Just like Black Americans got relatives everywhere. You was going to many boroughs and seeing many things. We deserve that credit, and it takes away from the possibilities of music. And the last thing is, like, to me, it goes against the entire timeline of all recorded music. Because the timeline of recorded music is really the timeline of, if we got real simple, two giant juggernauts of jazz and son, and them infusing and going outward and influencing everything. And there's blending and everything with it. And when you take it away and segregate, you're ruining all the possibilities and all of the truth that could be uncovered, And it's terrible. It's terrible. And if we had real coalitions, we would know, and people, they get food for this. If we had real coalitions of Black and brown, we would know that no coalition, Black Americans by themselves, brown by themselves, or any coalition, is always the few. It's always the few. If you want to go, all of those Puerto Ricans are being nasty to me. All of those Ecuadorians, they be this to me. That's what it always has been. It's the few that get together and make hip hop. It's the few that get together and champion civil rights, human rights, everything that we champion. Even when you go to our Native American brothers and look in their reservations, though, they all need to be fighting for their rights. And yet it's only the select few that do that. So we can't just generalize and just compile the wrong things that our people does to us and then say, you see those Black people, they always do that to me. Man, Derrick, if I did that, just the people in hip hop that have done me wrong, I would be like, I'm not messing with Black Americans no more. But if I did that too in my personal life, like just regular life, I'd be like, man, I ain't messing with no Puerto Ricans no more. Like it doesn't work that way. And we have to get away from this hate related way of building up community. The hate focused way of building up the community. It's the wrong way. It's the wrong way. And that's the biggest takeaway.
Yes, sir. Brother, thank you so much, bro, for just the build. Thank you for taking your time. I want to connect with you on a private level.
Absolutely.
I got an idea I want to do, and I need your help on that. But let me just say to the chat real quick before we get off. Let me just say to everybody, listen. Please, again, if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe, like, share, and channel memberships are available for exclusive content, for content that can be only seen by members first only content. But also check out the documentaries, right? So we have the Latin Breakdown, Hip Hop's Latino Connection, that's available. We have Hip Hop is from the Bronx. That's the first documentary. And then we have the new docu-series that part one has just been released. It's a 5-part series, so that'll be released over time. And so check out part one. Please like, please share. This is good information. Let me do this. Wait a minute. Hold on. I forgot. Sunez, where can they find you? What's
Yeah,
your
they
socials?
can find me. I have a Substack, Sunez.substack, Sunez.substack, Sunez on the Instagram, Sunez7, number 7 on Twitter, and they can always email me for more detail. Like a lot of people ask about the knowledge itself, all that kind of stuff. They could go to my YouTube page, Sunez number 7. Every Thursday night, I broadcast my class from a law school in Mecca. So I got plenty of time to talk to you about any of that stuff. But the hip hop stuff, I got the Real of 2024 book. I have albums of my own coming out, another solo album coming out, more work with King Kamal, Peace to God. So it's just creating and documenting and just enjoying this culture. You know what I mean? Just really enjoying
Yes,
this
sir.
culture. You know, and
All
I want
right,
to thank
man.
you, Derrick, because the documentation you've been doing has really enlightened me, and I've learned so much. I've learned so much.
That means a lot coming from you, brother. Really, it does. Thank you so much. And listen to the chat, Andrina. Thank you for moderating all the supporters, all those who come and rock with us every week. Thank you so much. And until the next time, don't forget every no, not every Thursday. Every Saturday night, 7 p.m. we do underground sessions of Bible study for the culture. So, come on in, vibe with us. We're going through the Gospel of John right now. We're just kicking it. We're just asking the question, who is Jesus? And what did the scripture say about him? So come on through. And I'll talk to you in the next episode. Grace and peace.